So good afternoon. We are hosting a podcast today about political climate in Georgia and disinformation. Our guest speaker for today is Ambassador of Germany to Georgia, Mr. Peter Fischer. We are very grateful that you have found time in August, and we know that you are extremely busy, and we are very grateful that you have found time to speak to us about the current developments in Georgia as well as internationally. And today we're going to be speaking about, as I said, general political climate in Georgia. We are going to review the inter-country relationship between Germany and Georgia, because Germany and Georgia have a partnership of over 30 years, and Germany has done so much for Georgia. And personally, I would like to say that I'm a former DAAD scholarship holder. I had an opportunity to secure a research grant from DAAD and spend time in Berlin for my research, PhD research. So I have personally experienced huge benefits from Germany, and I'm very grateful. And I would like to speak today. I guess my first question would cover the pre-election climate in Georgia, because we're coming up to parliamentary elections on 26th of October. It's a very tense environment that we've never witnessed before. We've seen a lot of things in Georgia, but nothing like this before, because for the first time in the history of independent Georgia, Georgian government has reversed its foreign course by 100%. So we've gone from a country that always wanted to be part of the EU, and we're always aspiring to become part of the EU, to being a country whose government officials are criticizing members of other governments, European governments, are criticizing our strategic partners, and are ruining our long-fought freedom, and are ruining our relationship with our dear partners, which is a painful process. And we have witnessed youth, and not just youth, but Georgian population, large crowds protesting for months from May to July against the foreign agency law, which has been completely unacceptable and out of line. And despite that, we didn't get any response or any empathy from the government. And all we got was cynicism, hate speech, disinformation, and messages that have been directed. They call us radical liberalists, radical opposition, even though everyone I know has been protesting on the streets, almost everyone. So in this climate, we're coming up to very difficult elections. And in your view, being one of the most prominent ambassadors that we have in Georgia, a huge supporter of Georgia and a huge friend, how would you assess the pre-election climate in Georgia today?
So thank you very much for allowing me to join you, Nina. And we're colleagues, as we just found out, because I was also the recipient of a DAAD scholarship that sent me to France. And we have many other colleagues in Georgia, including some of your leading politicians. And so I'm happy to comment on everything and have opinions on everything, but I'm also a diplomat. And our first rule is not to interfere into internal affairs. And I will stick to that rule. Georgia is for the Georgians. The election is for the Georgians. The future is of the Georgians. And you and your countrymen and women will have to decide which course the country takes. So my observations are the observations of a diplomat, a foreign diplomat, but I do agree wholeheartedly with you, a friend of Georgia. Not just me personally. Well, I'm tempted to say I love Georgia. Georgia's a beautiful place. I'm not the only German that loves Georgia. But I represent a country which has been a strong partner of Georgia since your most recent independence. a partnership which we can also call a friendship. And even in 1918, during the independence that was before that, we were the first. We were the first to accredit an ambassador in 1992. And what has our partnership been based on? In the early 90s, when you fell out of the Soviet Union, the Georgian people expressed their wish to become a democracy, to have a market economy, a functioning market economy, to stabilize the country. And we said, that's good, because we're a democracy. We have a market economy. We can work together on that. And we also came from a place where we didn't have democratic freedoms and we didn't have a working economy. Then came the Georgian people's desire for Euro-Atlantic integration, and we said, that's good. We're Euro-Atlantic, we're integrated, we can work on that. Then came the desire to join the European Union. And again, we said, that's good, because we're a member of the European Union. We would like for you to join. If you want to, we could talk about the reasons why it's our interest for Georgia to join. And if it's your interest, we have a mutual interest. So when I came 2 years ago, we were walking hand in hand, if you like, productively in the same direction, on a common path, towards a great ambition, which is being members of the European Union together. And it's true, what you said, that what we had to witness, what I witnessed, was a reversal of that productive path that we were on. Early this year, in the first half of this year, the Georgian government took some concrete actions, namely legislation, and the most important one is the law on the transparency of foreign influence, but some others as well, which are not compatible with joining the EU. With this law on the transparency of foreign influence, you cannot join the EU. Full stop. That's just not debatable. I've talked about the reasons many times. I'm happy to get into more detail, but if the viewers want to understand anything from this podcast, this law is not compatible with the EU. Plus, there has been a rhetoric against the old best friends, against Germany, against the European Union, against other European Union member states, against the United States of America, which I believe also has been a good friend to Georgia. So a very vicious rhetoric, which is not usual amongst partners. And that's, I'm speaking diplomatically now when I say it's not usual. I mean, the claim has been made that the EU finances terror. The EU does not finance terror. The EU fights terror. The claim has been made that a European commissioner threatened assassination. I don't believe it. I didn't listen to the phone conversation, but it's impossible for me to believe. We don't assassinate people. And we're being mixed in a general story about the global war party and liberal fascism and revolution and second front, being mixed into a place where we don't belong. I've also said this many times. The European Union was born out of the smoldering rubble of World War II. It is our conclusion after centuries of excessive nationalism, of fascism, of Nazism, of violence, of genocide, to change the way we do things. So we are nowhere close to anything that could be called a war party or a global war party. We're the global peace party. So this reversal has surprised us, has disappointed us, raises many question marks about what is the future course. And we have to just say plainly, our partnership was based on a certain basis: democracy, market economy, Euro-Atlantic integration, joining the European Union. That's the basis. If that's no longer the basis, then our partnership will change. And already we have introduced some changes to signal that to our partner, Georgia. We still recognize that basis. From our side, that is the basis. That's what we want. But we really, through actions and rhetoric, we have to ask ourselves, is that what Georgia wants? Is that what the Georgian government wants? And the Georgian people have to ask themselves, what do we want?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in terms of disinformation, just to get into a bit more specifics, the nine criteria that we need to fulfill as a country that holds candidacy status, fighting disinformation is obviously the first one. In a highly polarized environment that we live in, starting from social media to traditional media, starting from local disinformation to foreign disinformation, and I wouldn't say that just Russian, it's probably Chinese operated disinformation now as well. What we actually see examples of trolls and bots that are spreading these rumors, not just on Georgian sort of pages of social media, but also if you look at Twitter, that I know you actively use, X, formerly Twitter, apologies to Elon Musk, but if you look at that platform, when foreign politicians make statements, the EU Parliament members, foreign politicians, there is a well-organized group of trolls and bots that attack them in comments by spreading disinformation, saying that if Georgian Dream loses power, that will lead to the invasion of Georgia by Russia. So it's almost simultaneous action. And we are hearing time and time again that the only way to keep peace in this region is apparently by being, we call it monoba in Georgian, but it's slavery basically. So becoming completely under Russian obedience, becoming slave to Russia. And that's the only way to keep peace in this country, apparently. We are hearing time and time again things like the EU is collapsing. The UK wouldn't have exited the EU if it wasn't for the collapse of the EU. Germany is about to exit the EU. EU is going to impose laws on Georgia that against the will of Georgian people. So this is like a summary of disinformation narratives that we hear time and time again. The EU is using us, NATO is using us, the US doesn't care about Georgia but is only using Georgia, etc., etc. And unfortunately, I think this poses a real problem. It's easy to scare Georgian, I'm not saying Georgian people, but I'm saying generally when a person maybe doesn't have access to primary sources, doesn't listen to international media sources, maybe doesn't speak foreign languages, it's easier to, they are more vulnerable, especially in the region, especially people who are older, who don't have the skills that we have to check fake news, to reveal disinformation. And in that sense, what do you think about the climate in terms of the disinformative messages that are circulating? And the primary thing that we need to tackle is, do you actually agree with the narrative that loss of power by Georgian Dream would equal the beginning of war and Russia would invade Georgia if Georgian Dream loses power?
So that's, first of all, a very good question. What I notice is, and it's not just a Georgian phenomenon, disinformation, unfortunately, through the channels that we know, through information bubbles and social media and the textbook of the populists, just to claim anything, regardless of whether it's true or not true. We all remember the statement about alternative facts, just to call white black and black white and keep repeating it. So disinformation is a challenge everywhere. What I think is unfortunate is a climate of kind of a paranoia. I'm not sure that Georgians are paranoid, but what's being reported, what's being written about is that everything is at risk. Everyone is a traitor. Everyone wants war and revolution. And the catastrophe is in front of the door. I'm not sure that's true. Georgia has so many things going for it, so many strengths, has made so much progress. If you think back to 91, 92, look at the great development that Georgia has had. Why shouldn't it continue in a positive sense? And so what I miss in Georgia and in the discussion in other countries, including my own sometimes, but in Georgia it's especially strong, is where's the positive agenda? Why aren't people talking about jobs, housing, education, health, pensions, the things that really affect people's lives? War and peace, yes, a big issue. But I'm sad when I see issues of war and peace being dealt with to scare people. Mm-hmm. And so if we get back to and if you look at the US campaign, we see that too, right? We see a certain candidate saying that everything is breaking down. Mm-hmm. Well, look at the US. It's not like everything is breaking down. And you mentioned sort of narratives about the EU, that we're being flooded by foreigners, that we have liberal debauchery and everything is going down the drain. I don't think so. If that were the case, how come so many Georgians are moving to the EU all the time? Actually, I would say the EU, of course I'm partial, the EU is the best place to live in the world. First of all, we have peace, and we came from a difficult environment. We were facing the Soviet Union. I come from West Berlin. I come from a divided city. The Soviets were, a few kilometers away from where my playground was. Germany was divided. The EU plus NATO was our guarantee of a peaceful development. The EU was our guarantee and continues to be our guarantee of a democratic and free development, democracy and freedom rights for the citizens. And the EU is our best bet to have a healthy economic development, social development, with a good environmental standards as well. So to be a happy society. So peace, democracy and freedom, and a good development of society. That's the EU, and that's what we've achieved. And now that offer is on the table for Georgia. So it worries me when around this whole issues there's all this paranoia. Why be so paranoid? Why not look at the positive agenda? Georgia has made progress. It's at the front door of the European Union. Historically, look at every member that joined. From the original group to which Germany belonged, we came from the ruins of Europe and we built up something very positive and prosperous and peaceful and free. Freedom for the citizens, that's the core of our union. Why don't we talk more about what's positively available and how to get there, rather than seeing sinister enemies everywhere and war on the doorstep. I'm not saying to underestimate risks that come from Russia, that come from other places. We appreciate Georgia's vulnerabilities. We appreciate that Georgia for hundred of years has been oppressed and terrorized by Russia and attacked. But we're offering our help, our support. And I see more positive in that than any reason for fear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in terms of help and support, Could you please just re-evaluate because I know that you hold an active packet of projects sort of worth substantial financial amounts. And despite all the rhetoric that you're hearing, embarrassing rhetoric, if we leave everything else aside, it's just embarrassing rhetoric from Georgian government against Germany, against our dear friends and partners. Could you please evaluate for us all the things that Germany has done for Georgia in the 30-year plus partnership and friendship that we have had, and the facts that you have mentioned, Germany being one of the first countries that recognized the independence of Georgia by sending the ambassador. One of the first ambassadors to Georgia was from Germany back after the collapse of Soviet Union. And
was
always
the first ambassador.
The first ambassador. And all the support that we've had for our independence, and through all the things that you have done for the education system, for people who have had access to top universities through scholarship. So could you please tell us how is embassy, in what directions does embassy sort of continue to work with Georgia in different sectors for the moment?
So it's really a partnership across the board. And wherever I go in Georgia, I see this breadth and depth of our relationship. Unfortunately, it's practically impossible to put a number on it because we don't count it like peas. But in what we call development cooperation, we've given around and about 2 billion euros to this country, and the active portfolio is about 1 billion euro. That means these projects are 5-6-year projects, so actively we have 1 billion under management, if you want to say it like that. But that doesn't include your scholarship, doesn't include the scholarships for some of the leading politicians of this country. It doesn't include the support we give to schools for German training. It doesn't support the advice we gave for major parts of your legal system. I don't have them all on the top of my head, but the Minister of Justice, Rati Brigade, he can tell you exactly. I think we advised you on the Constitution, on and business law, perhaps criminal law, a number. How do you say? I don't know exactly now which, but a lot of your law has been elaborated in collegial support with German jurists, let's put it that way. We work with children and so on. Maybe this is a good time to talk about NGOs.
Absolutely.
We work with a lot of different NGOs in this country. And they can be closer to the political side of things. We have supported the NGO that works to monitor the freeness and fairness of elections. We have supported the anti-corruption NGO, but we support environmental NGOs. We support NGOs that work on sustainable rural tourism. We work with NGOs that work with orphans, with handicapped people, handicapped children. We work with NGOs that work on gender equality, against violence against women, and so on and so forth. I'm sure we can find an NGO that supports traditional Svanetian hat making, I would say perfectly innocent things, have nothing to do with politics, really. Yeah. And what is about these NGOs? So the EU, which Georgia has applied to join and says it still does want to join, there's nothing mysterious about it. Everything is written down. What is the EU? Just read the EU treaties. It's all there. How to join? There's the Copenhagen criteria. There's the Commission statements. What is the state of affairs right now? Read the European Council conclusions of 27th of June 2024 that says the accession process of Georgia has come to a halt. come to a halt as it stands right now. We are not taking any further steps. From the EU side, which means there aren't any further steps. Georgia can't take steps by itself. You can't join the EU without the EU. And so we're a union of liberal democracies. We speak about the humanist and liberal tradition of Europe. That's in the treaties. And by the way, that tradition comes from the Christian faith, because we believe the individual is made in the image of God. And therefore, the individual is free and equal. And this freedom is the underlying principle of liberal democracies. The individual becomes the citizen, and the citizen decides who is the government and which direction the government should take. The individual decides how they want to be ruled, what they want the government to do. And these individuals should participate in, we say, the formation of political will. So they should participate in the public sphere. But of course, they don't participate only as individuals, one by one. They form groups, and these are called the NGOs. And a lively civil society sector, a lively sector of NGOs, where the citizens express their will for whatever it is, be it free and fair elections, or be it Svanetian hat making, be it any of the areas that I have mentioned, is essential to liberal democracy, and it's a principle of the European Union. So if you pass a law that could, let's just say could, limit the civil society, could limit NGOs, then that's contradictory to the EU. And what does it mean to join the EU? Georgians like to say, oh, you know, we're part of the European family, or we want to join the European family, or I am Georgian, therefore I'm European, or we have European civilization. All that is true. I sit here with you, I feel I'm sitting with a European. I look around me, I feel like I'm sitting in an especially beautiful part of Europe. But it doesn't matter for joining. Joining is not about feelings or sympathy or history. Family is a birthright. You're born into your family. Now you want to join the organization. It's a legal process, nothing else. And a country that joins adopts all European legislation. That's what happens when you join. The moment you join, that means all European legislation is valid now in your country. And if it's not, then you haven't joined. And if you pass laws that are contradictory to fundamental principles of the European Union, then you can't join. And this law on foreign transparency of foreign influence is contradictory because exactly it violates fundamental principles. We say it's a grossly disproportionate interference into fundamental rights of the citizens that are guaranteed by the European Union for its citizens. That's the part that I can say. What people in Georgia could say, which is evident, it also seems to me to violate fundamental rights that are guaranteed to Georgians in the Constitution, in the European Convention on Human Rights that Georgia ratified, and the International Convention on Civil and Human Rights, Political Rights, the United Nations Conventions, also ratified by Georgia. And this grossly disproportionate is a very important way to look at things. So if you have liberal democracy and you say the foundation is freedom for the citizens, freedom for the NGOs, let's say you have a problem with the NGOs. Find a way that's to address the problem with minimal interference. I'm not saying there's never any problem with NGOs, but if you want to address it, use the smallest tool, most precise tool. Absolutely. But this takes all 25,000 NGOs in Georgia and puts them all under a limitation. And from what I hear, it's also a law that's doesn't really meet the standards for a great law because the citizens are not sure how to fulfill it.
Yeah.
The forms are confusing. They take a lot of work. They raise a lot of questions, and they give the government some sort of sweeping, perhaps arbitrary powers, which are also in contradiction to fundamental principles of how we do business and how we pass laws in Europe. So I rambled on a little bit.
No.
But it's always important for me to say, what is Europe? A union of liberal democracies. Liberal democracies are all about freedom rights of the citizens. First come the citizens, then comes the government. It's about the freedom of the people. And therefore, we don't pass laws that might limit the freedom of the people in a grossly disproportionate way. So what is the EU? Why does this law not fit in? It has nothing to do with laws in the USA or in France. That's just false. I'm happy to explain that too. I've explained it many times. Why does this law not fit in? And then it's up to the Georgians. I would like Georgians to make an informed decision. And that brings us back to misinformation or disinformation. In the information space, there's a lot of information which distracts from those three key points. What is the EU? Why is this law not compatible? It's not. And what is the accession process? With this law, Georgia will not join the EU.
Absolutely. I think you raised very important points. First of all, saying that this law is not similar to FARA, USS FARA, or other laws that may have carried the same name, but in essence, they're completely different. And here it's aimed to give more power of censorship and surveillance to the government. It has a lot of issues that obviously we don't have time to summarize because I'm aware of your time, but you've spoken about it many times in the past. Starting from data protection to being completely out of line with the EU standards. This law is inadequate and it's not European. It's an instrument for authoritarianism and for basically building a dictatorship.
So I can confirm this is my role. It's not European. It's contradictory to fundamental principles of European law.
Absolutely. So in terms of the EU, I would like, because I hope people in regions will listen to this podcast, and people who maybe don't understand what it really means to live under the EU citizenship. Like, for example, we've spoken to European politicians. I have spoken to European politicians before, and European citizenship essentially means, better salaries, better working conditions, more job security, better human rights, better justice system when you can actually achieve justice when you go to the court, protection, better health system, all of these things that I want people, ordinary people, to hear. So not just democracy and high values and international treaties, but in actual fact, EU citizenship will change their lives, day-to-day lives. And I think it's important to hear from you as a great ambassador of one of the most prominent and strongest countries in Europe. I think it's important to break down exactly what EU citizenship will bring to an ordinary Georgian person.
So I should have brought some numbers with me, which I didn't, but I would really invite people to have a look at the development, the socio-economic development in Czechia, Slovakia, Poland. Let's just take those. And the Baltic countries. I think that was the last wave of enlargement.
Yeah.
The standard of living has increased across the board. Higher salaries, higher pensions, and we have just very good standards in the EU for the environment, for safety, for housing, for education. But probably the most compelling argument is just the standard of living. Look at the average income per capita, and you can You can look at it in purchasing power parity. Okay, I don't want to be nerdy about it, but people have more money.
Yeah.
They have more money to live their lives the way they want, and they have the right to live their lives the way they want, to do with the money whatever they want. And I think probably that's clear to almost every Georgian. We have more money in the EU. We're wealthier, more prosperous. And all the underlying things, democracy, freedom, rule of law, institutions, that's what produces this more money. And perhaps I'll get a little bit more abstract again. But freedom and liberal democracy means also we don't owe uniformity of thought to anyone, to the state, to any higher authority. We're free to think what we want. That's also the basis of more money, because from freedom of thought and diversity of thought comes creativity, comes innovation, comes productivity, comes more money on the table every day.
Absolutely. And stronger private sector as well, and more just public sector where you can actually be protected. Also, that brings me to my final question, which I think is more sort of assessment of what's going on currently, internationally. And in terms of the Caucasus region and what's going on in Ukraine, we're all aware that Ukraine is fighting. I think it's fair to say that Ukraine is fighting Georgian fight as well. It's really important that,
it's fighting German fight.
German fight,
European
everyone's fight, democratic world's fight. It's
Yes.
a common fight. And we also see Moldova and Ukraine open up sort of negotiation accession talks.
Yes.
And if we miss this window of opportunity, because it only came to us by chance, earlier than we expected. And I still remember the day in December when we got the candidacy status, and it was so personal. People were almost crying from happiness, happy tears. And by opening up this window of opportunity, we have a historic chance that may not come again for a while, and may not come again ever in the hands of Georgian Dream. How would you assess, how long is this window of opportunities going to be open for us, for Georgia? And how pivotal and how historic is going to be the outcome of the elections on 26th of October? And therefore, all this international observation, election observation missions operating long-term in Georgia in order to achieve the fair election regime. In this environment, how important it is for people to go and vote, because one of the things that we need to inspire is for young people, Gen Z, who were so actively fighting on the streets. It's important to take that fight to ballot boxes. It's important to go and vote, and to realize, including people who are in immigration, so many Georgians all across the world, how important it is to participate in the upcoming elections, in your view.
Yeah, so let me start with Ukraine. So we speak about a post-World War II peace order in Europe, where one of the fundamentals was we agreed not to change borders by force. And Russia violated that. It said, I wish to impose my will on Ukraine, and if they don't do as I say, I will come with the tanks, and I will change the borders. So Ukraine is really fighting the fight of all countries that are in favor of the principle of not changing borders by force, of living together peacefully, of allowing each country to determine its own fate. And we don't have time, but Germany is a great supporter of Ukraine in that fight. And Germany, NATO, and the EU. That's what we do. We support people's right to decide their own fate and live their life the way they like. On, was it 14th December 2023
Yes.
when you got candidate
Yes,
status?
it was.
I was also very happy. And I worked towards that goal. And you mentioned the 9 points. Before it was the 12 points, 9 points. Georgia's progress has been meager, right?
Yes.
And myself and other Germans were among those that said they don't have to show everything up front. More will come. Candidate status is important now. So I was also very happy. And I stood on the stage in Freedom Square with Mr. Garibashvili and Mr. Kobakhidze and the whole Georgian government. And we were all very happy. So what happened? And now about the importance of voting. If you live in a democracy, and Georgia is a democracy, right? You have, the power is in your hands as a citizen. And we talked about NGOs. It's good to be active, voice what you have to say, do a podcast, write an article, join an NGO, do some practical work, whatever. But in a democracy, ultimately, the laws are written in parliament, and the government is there to manage the state well. So if you really want to change something, get into politics, join a party, go into parliament, write the laws. That's where the real power is. And I know many people who made that transition from extra or outside parliament activity. And I said, I've decided really, I really want to change. I need to join politics. That's one thing. But every single citizen who's over 18 has a superpower in their hands. That is to vote. And we say in Germany, it's your responsibility to vote. And we say it's almost like an obligation. In Germany, it's not an obligation. You don't have to vote. You can abstain from voting, refrain from voting. But in such an important moment in Georgia's history, where we talked about what is the future path? What is the future towards the EU? If that's important for you, my goodness, go out and vote. That's the minimum thing you should do. And inform yourself as best as you can. Always try to check. Don't be caught in one information bubble. I do that all the time. I read things where I expect not to be convinced, but I just want to read what other people are saying. Don't just read people who agree with you. Be informed. Go out and vote, because you said rightly, there's a window that's open now. The window is wide open. I like to say the door is open, but Georgia has to walk through it. There's no side door. There is no side door. It's open now. You didn't get it by chance, but the time was kind of determined by chance and by the war against Ukraine. It's a thing in history. Sometimes historic opportunities slip away. Sometimes democracies slip away. In Germany, democracy slipped away, and Hitler came to power. Hitler got 30-some% of the vote. It wasn't like more than half of the Germans voted him in, but through political machinations, he got the chancellorship, and then he took all the power. So democracy can slip away, and opportunities can slip away. I like to say, you can miss your historic rendezvous, your historic meeting. And right now, the mood in the EU is very friendly towards enlargement, to the accession of the 9 states that we are actively negotiating with. Turkey has been frozen, as you know. So it's Georgia plus 8 others, plus Turkey, which is frozen. But it's very friendly. We say, let's extend this area of peace, democracy and freedom and well-being as far as possible, as far as reasonable, where people can rightfully be called Georgians. We won't be doing it with Mongolia or Argentina. It's just too a step too far, because that's good for us. That's why we're saying it. But there can be a time when the political mood changes again. And I'll be a little bit forward-leaning. Some people say, oh, the movement of the right in Europe is great, we welcome it. It can be good for Georgia. I don't think so. The right in Germany, they say Ausländer raus, foreigners out. They don't want any new members. They want less foreigners.
Yes.
So moods change. You mentioned Britain.
Yeah.
Britain was in the EU, they had a mood, then they went out. Now they have the blues that they went out, and nothing improved. Nothing improved. Still, they're very good friends of ours, of course. So inform yourself, understand that there's a great opportunity before Georgia. I once said it's our biggest sign of love towards Georgia to say, join our union, really come into our organization. I think it's a great opportunity. It's been good for all the countries that joined, that you can study the numbers, the polls, anything you look at, it's been good. We do have more money, if that's the summary of why it's better, more prosperity. And then go out and vote according to your preferences.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think that was very inspirational, very informative, and an insider knowledge into how the EU works, hearing from the first hand. And I really hope that it's been enough to convince even young people who may be in apathy or may think that it doesn't really matter, their one vote. Well, it matters, and I think we all agree on that. And it matters for your personal future, for your children's future, and for the future of the country that we've been fighting so hard to keep democratic and on the EU path, which I hope we'll go back to after 26th of October. Dear Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to have you as our guest, and I hope I will see you in a happier times, in happier environment post-elections. Thank you very much.
Always stay positive, so I think happy times will come. And you said to young people that might be in apathy, dear young people, don't be apathetic. Don't say, I can't change anything, it's not up to me, I'm just a small, or I couldn't care, politics is not interesting. It's about your life, about your future.
Of course. It's very personal. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks.